that I was just biking by looked like the whole street was closed off. It looked like they had a bunch, not the whole street, but it was on the street with like wood around it. And it looked like it had a bunch of, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they look like those heat lamps.
My Italian revisiting.
My daughter and I ate out for dinner, and we ate early enough that we were the only ones at the restaurant.
This. Can you take the camera? Am I? I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grolier Poetry. I'm so excited for the reading tonight. We have Kathleen Ossip and Sandra Lim reading for us. My name is Fiona. I'm an intern here. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you for being here, everybody. It's really nice to see tap your faces, I guess I should say. So I have the pleasure of introducing Sandra Lim. And so, what?
You could take the next one.
Oh, right. Forgot about that. Okay. All right. So I have the pleasure of introducing Sandra Lim. And I feel like when you're going to introduce a poet at a reading, you read their book with sort of special antenna and with all your circuits open. And I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to read Sandra Lim's The Curious Thing in that way, because it's a book that rewards that kind of absorbed reading. And it opens with a bit of advice from Renoir about nothing less than how to live and what to do. This is Renoir. You must let yourself go along in life like a cork in the current of a stream. And the speaker of the book does this, I think, because we all must, as Renoir told us. But here's the curious thing. The poems find wisdom and inexperience in the going along. And as we all know, that's difficult to do. The poems tell us that even when life bears us along like a current, beyond our control, we can notice, we can make out of senselessness a new kind of sense. These are 21st C lyrics in conversation with tradition only in the sense that they seem determined to make beauty out of thinking everything through afresh. These poems are continually listening to the advice in the long poem titled A Shaggy Dog Story, which takes the form of an autobiographical narrative, and that advice is start again, which essentially means that the shaping consciousness of the poems is always alive to the present and always alert and always, always original. Sandra Lim was born in Seoul, Korea, and grew up in California. She earned a BA from Stanford University, a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Sandra is also the author of the collections Loveliest Grotesque, which won a Corey Press First Book Award for Poetry, and The Wilderness, winner of a Barnard Women Poets Prize. Lim's work has been anthologized in Burlesque, The Racial Imaginary, and Among Margins, an anthology on aesthetics. Her honors and awards include fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Getty Research Institute, and a Pushcart Prize. She's an assistant professor of English at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Welcome, Sandra.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, let me take the mask off. It's sort of warm on a cold night like tonight. Thank you, Kathy, for that lovely introduction. And I'm sorry, I'm like staring at you all because it's really, I love this space and it's really just sort of dazzling to be in here. So I'm just taking that in for a moment. I'm very happy to read to you from The Curious Thing. I'm going to start out. I was just telling Kathy, I never have much to say in between poems, and they're quite short, so, but I'm getting a little bit better at not being so nervous in the in-between and just letting a poem speak for themselves. So this is the first poem of the book, and it's called The Protagonists. At one time, I asked for everything. When I saw how my love was squandered, I would secrete venom. But now I sing of the fat, sleepy little censor who has replaced me, whose disappointments create the life of the house. What does the human heart love? To go, to have so far to go in deepest night. The challenge now is to convey the supreme gaiety of the heart. It is a stone flung from a volcano. Spinoza says, "He who loves God cannot endeavor that God love him in return." Do you know, I think the cool silver of this is hard to live by. When there is anything you want very much, you are making up a story all of the time of how you will get it and how it will be. You want the love of God and the human sort, a big treasure and a little treasure. I wonder if you're like me, a touch affronted by your own underlying avidity. For now, it is pleasant to lie on one's bed, chronicling everything in ice. Though the hyenas in the room and the real flowers, these things take some of the innocence out of the day. Want in a person is like hunger in a dog, Spinoza probably would not say. His wakeful, solitary reasoning plainly outstrips my wildest intuition. Yet insofar as my heart is a boot with a hole in it, I think this is what writing could be. What he calls nature, an existence no longer born as means or ends. I realize this is the mic. Is this the camera? Okay. Just like, hello. Sorry. Suddenly I was very aware. I have some poems in this book that are names of cities, and I am originally from California, from the Bay Area. And I recently had a chance to go back there. I didn't get to visit this apartment that shows up in this poem, but it's sort of a dear place to me, and it's called San Francisco. My older neighbor on Rose Street once showed me the contents of his rent-controlled apartment, just up the stairs from mine. He was a hoarder, living in a state of tragic grandeur that his circumstances did not entirely support. Recurringly, his latest boyfriend would flee from him. When we met later in the alley to take out the trash, we would reliably turn into two lumps of fear. What was more terrifying than being abandoned? Downstairs, I was a collector too, with my need to interpret and sort everything. But we didn't tire of the spectacle of our private lives, though many initiatives went badly wrong. I was altogether more anxious about being light-minded. My railroad apartment was a small cloth diary with a lock and key. It was my real life, or what so often passes among us for real life. And for all his possessions, my neighbor dreamed of having a petite Trianon with a vast garden to walk in and dog roses lavishing a limitless dining room table. Of course, there was no table because there was no dining room. Obviously, there was never a garden to walk in. Refuseniks. Her favorite person, Flaubert, says, "When you write the biography of a friend, You must do it as if you were taking revenge for him. Who says we have to live like everyone else? She drops a line down onto the page. In a poet's household, some people secretly love bad news. Like a dog in the kitchen, she investigates this scrap. It could be a nod from naturalism to realism, or a salute the other way around. It could be just the sort of thing one writes when one feels the stirrings of happiness close at hand. I'm going to read a poem. I've been here now over 10 years, New England. I was excited when I walked into a bar in San Francisco and they checked my ID. Well, first of all, I was excited for them to check my ID. And secondly, the guy said, "Oh my gosh, Massachusetts." And I looked up and he had a Red Sox cap on. And so he was like, "Massachusetts." And my friend was like, "Don't pretend like you're a big baseball fan." But I was like, I'm all for the Red Sox. So this is Boston. When I first moved to this city to take a job and the snows began to fall, a slow sadness took hold of me. Someone left a tiny pencil drawing of a sailboat on the ceiling of my bedroom, and I would stare up at it each night, thinking that it would eventually stir. I met someone that first spring, and I didn't love him, but I very much wanted someone to look at me in all my youth and feminine momentum. I think what I will do is I will read the long poem, A Shaggy Dog Story. It's in parts, it's in numbered parts, and I'll call out each section. A Shaggy Dog Story. 1. I am hot and tiny, yet I wrote Jane Eyre. I died on a rainy Thursday in Paris. Much later, I come home to a household laid waste by a tin of fatal corned beef. I take my pen name from a small French village. I drink like a fish. I'm always looking at the same piece of paper, giving up hope and working a little. What does art know? Sometimes it remarks, "I didn't think you were like that." I thump my casing without feeling, too much material, and the steady hubbub within seems off the point. All this is a pig of an undertaking, just to touch thoughts. No one knows anything about life's meaning, though it all gets carted away, even the great scheme of things. 2. In the middle of my life, I felt a heave of something like nausea. My real life had really begun, no longer a speculative existence, though I still loved having a whole day ahead of me. Hurt and excited, I wanted to get everything down on the page. I was as anxious to entertain as Scheherazade, and as certain that if I failed, I would die. It seemed that anything less than that was unfair. 3. I saw my friends fall in love, their tremendous happiness, deciding upon something at the last minute. I pictured myself eating dirt. My moods were like conspirators in an opera, then strange-faced like a jury. The view from inside was nothing but walls and drain pipes and a little sky, florid 18th century music against taciturn furniture. And there was just me and my human concerns. 4. I fell asleep thinking heaven is renters in urban apartments, the sanctioned anonymity sharpening whatever's funny or jabbing in a person or misapplied or ruined. Our likability having nothing to do with the legitimacy of our demands for privacy. We bandaged up the bleeding and tearful young woman from the first floor without comment on a Wednesday. I think she went to the movies about an hour later, looking as fresh as a daisy. The steadying and flushed sensation of setting forth. Whatever spring didn't restore, you sometimes felt you could, with nothing left over. 5. Love was losing its explanatory power, and I was beginning to smell a rat. Are we going to keep to this one grand concern, like a serious drinker who sticks to one drink? Start again. Like all ideas, it appears to root and come into leaf. The transience intensifies the effects. Sometimes it even flourishes in dryness. Metaphors like this can be lazy, and I am trying to get at the work of the matter. The gap that is shaped like a person, the longing to be with and to be alone. You give time to all these things. It goes on till all hours, and somebody must clean up afterward. And then the silence begins, wonderfully, wonderfully. 6. Why must I urge you to feel the smallness of your life? I think it's a pleasure of the mind like any other. I think there must be a way to care for dogs without treating them like dumb humans, though the mind is one long, unbreakable leash. The other day, my friend declared that she favored straightforward narratives, clear, unassuming, and if tart, amiably so. I felt the reproach. But style, as Diana Vreeland says, helps you get down the stairs. 7. Several months now passed without event, several years. The grubs and worms themselves tell the story, couriers with few adjectives. I think I have some capacity for abstract reasoning after the world cools its details. But I'm still having difficulty writing about time. It does not appear to be the great healer that all of us say it is. 8. And here, life is going on too. A coffee pot, 4 towels, a book, a lamp, and a bed. Your ignorant hair grows long, you become drowsy with lust, with infinite dogginess. Pleasure, like a focusing lens. You admire the bold loneliness of a real life as never before. And when the world treats you well, you sometimes come to believe you are deserving of it. 9. I'm traveling back to childhood. I'm going to the sea. I will throw myself down onto the rocks, down into the sea, where there are no predispositions. 10. I was face down again in the dark blue mud, where the cold and rocks and glints and verdigris tried to draw me into the passionate logic of their work. It was just after my 8th birthday. It made me shy. What are you doing down there? My parents asked me. They had prepared winter food, stew, crude vegetables, mung beans. But I couldn't be persuaded. The days up to then had been like pearls on a string, one no after another, until one day they were like a fire spreading, arrogant but sociable. Part of what makes life shameful and exciting is the fact of being gripped by something true that you just barely intuit. I breathed in its complex sense. So I will just close with the poem called The Mountaintop. The Mountaintop. In truth, you still expect to order your life in peace. You continue to long for glamour and passion. To guard against the destiny you don't really know, you work furiously. Pensive and unathletic as you are, you have your own intricate schedule with your shopping bags and appointments. You always forget you're a bag of blood. In sleep, these things lose their power over you. Meaninglessness does to you what it can. When you wake, you have no ideas. The heart is momentarily light. As you slip back into the days, you find you haven't done with certain notions yet. You read all the time. Help yourself to a plate of oysters. The dreams become fresh and astounding once more, renewed by the drama of betrayal. Even the self you take to be so real falls away while you labor. And the only stones left are the ones in your throat. Foregone things you have to get down fast, or else you'll choke. At last, you don't even know what you feel for yourself. The mountaintop. You can keep your books and your music there. What's bad in one story is good in another. Something has made you brave. There's more to life than writing. Thank you. I'm just gonna stay up here. It's like walking out of the room, coming back in. Hello. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm excited to introduce Kathy. I'll read you sort of the bio and tell you a little bit about my reactions to the book. But Kathleen Ossip's most recent book of poems is July. She's also the author of The Do-Over, which was a New York Times editor's choice, The Cold War, and The Search Engine, selected by Derek Walcott for the American Poetry Review Honickman First Book Prize. Her poems, essays, and fiction have appeared widely in such publications as The Washington Post, The Best American Poetry, The New York Review of Books, The New Republic, Poetry, Paris Review, and many others. She has received a fellowship from the New York Foundation for the Arts, and she has been a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. Her most recent book, July, critic Eleanor Powell writes that the collection is, quote, an in-depth analysis of the factors that make the vast United States beautiful, complex, and terrifying, and that it succeeds in its depiction of one woman's increasingly personal encounters with her country. Beyond her skilled illustration of motherhood and citizenship, Ossip's contemplation of consumerism and religion is poignant throughout the collection and represents an original spin on the traditional narrative associated with the American road trip. I wanted to read you that quote just to give you a sense of how vast the book is. When I read it, I felt, I'm always impressed, especially with some of these long poems, how much the lyric voice can encompass. And a lot of these poems, again, something I admire, you could call them political poems or politically minded, but they feel not narrow, not didactic. I feel like the poems are really being written out of a roiling sense of history, and they're angry and they're funny and they're very moving. So please welcome Kathy Ossip. Hello again. So
I am going to read from the long poem that Sandra mentioned, which is the title poem of the book. It's called July. And it is long, very long. And I feel like I have to thank Radcliffe down the street for the fact that it is so long, because I wrote it while I was here and had a lot of time to write. So I'm going to read one, like the first poem in the book, which is not part of this road trip poem, and then I'll read a few bits from the road trip poem, July. The first poem in the book is called Go, so that's going to get us started. Go. It is a cube, it is red, it is mountainous, it is a bird of fire, it is the bones of the pelvis, it is a walnut, it is treasured. It is yellow Saturn wobbling in its orbit, it is danger squawking. It is the desire to sit down with strangers in cafes, and then it is the strangers in cafes. It is the man with the black t-shirt labeled unarmed civilian, and it is the unseeing man with him and his painful trembling. Always it is oxygen and more oxygen. It is the fight in you and the fight in you dying. It is the need for water and the water that falls from the sky. It is desperate for a theory, and it is the acts you call evil when you know that inside evil is always desperation. It is bravery, arrogance, purpose. It is the pink morning and your smile in the pink morning. It is a phantom and the thin neck of a tree. It is a little project called Loving the World. It is howling in the dirt. It is an extravaganza. It's the abandoned sports bra in the dirt beside howling you. It's the wind chimes in a thin neck tree, and it is tongue-tied. It is asleep. It is waking up now. It is a small cat on the bed. It is the threads of a leaf, and it is the three graces: splendor, mirth, and good cheer. It is their heartfelt advice. You can't let it hurt you. You must let it hurt you. It is a careless error and the hotel pool blue with chemistry. It's a kiss, of course it is a kiss. It's an old strange book, newly acquired but not yet cataloged. It is crazy. It is you, crazy with honesty and crazy with ambition. It's the sun that stuns over and over again. It's your tablet, which is every tablet everywhere. It's an explosion. It is every explosion everywhere. It is pavement, mineral and hot and wet with droplets. It's the stars that pitch white needles into the pond. It is provable. It is a lotion. It is a lie. It is a baby because everyone is a baby. It talks to you, always to you. It moves swiftly. It is stuck. It moves swiftly. It is stuck. It moves swiftly. It's the impenetrable truth, now clear as ice. It is serious. It is irreversible. It is going, going. It is flying, now flying, strong enough to know anything. So this poem, July, it is a road trip poem, and it's about a road trip that I took with my daughter in July of 2016, which I don't know if you remember, but it was a very infernal summer in a lot of ways. It was very hot. And it was when the presidential conventions were going, the party conventions were going on, and it seemed like every day there was another violent incident was the term that got used a lot that summer. So my daughter and I drove from the northernmost part of the continental United States to the southernmost part. So that's Minnesota to Key West, Florida. And I'm going to read, it's a diary style poem. So it has dates on every entry, I guess. And I'm going to read you some from the beginning, middle, and end. Here is, so I should tell you that in order to get to the northernmost part of the continental United States, you have to go for a bit through Canada and then come back into the United States. So that's this part. July 11th, Bemidji to Angle Inlet to Roseau, Minnesota. We walked a little way around the lake on a new path, planned but pleasant. To get to Angle Inlet, oh, I forgot to say something. My daughter's name is Muriel, and in the poem, she's mostly known as Muri, which is her nickname. To get to Angle Inlet, the true northernmost part of our journey, we drive through woods, coniferous, mostly sky. We have to cross into Canada for about 4 miles, then cross back into the US. The smiling white Canadian border agent, hello ladies, what brings you to Canada today? We outline our quixotic purpose. Okay, gals, have a great time. He explains that we have to call into US Customs when we get to Jim's Corner, then proceed to Angle Inlet, then call into Canadian Customs on our return. We're the only two nations that allow customs by phone. US and Mexico don't do that, he says proudly. Jim's Corner, I'd imagined a sort of general store where the call to customs would be made homespun by donuts and interesting hardware and Jim. Instead, a muddy corner lot with a rotary phone handset. When we get out of the car, we're targeted by flying insects as conscious as birds. On our way, we'd seen birds like ravens who'd been working out at the gym. Angle Inlet, a flock of white pelicans loiter wearily in the water near the shore. A caretaker, a white man, drives up in a truck and throws them some fish. Immediate frenzy, displays of aggression, slapping wings, expansion of their sullen mouth pouches. The drawing of a pelican in my mother's prayer book, pricking her own breast with her long pointed beak so that her starving babies could drink her blood. A symbol of Jesus who shed his blood to save us. And oh, the maternal martyrdom. OED app tells me John Skelton wrote, then said the pelican, when my births be slain, with my blood I them revive. Scripture doth record, the same did our Lord, and rose from death to life. We're staying the night in Roseau. Don't tread on me, flag. Husky trotting alongside of road. Oh well, can't see everything. Cleansing wave, gospel church. Jesus really loves us. I'd rather be a conservative nut job than a liberal with no nuts and no job. Bumper sticker on Pelican Feeder's truck. July 13th, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She always frays when she gets too hungry, and we ate a late small breakfast and skipped lunch. By 5 o'clock, she was frantic and too hungry to eat, and she wouldn't say yes to the Falls Overlook Cafe, although we were right there. She found on her phone an expensive restaurant downtown. I lost it and shouted that it'd be half an hour before we got there, sat down, ordered, and got food. Shame. She'd been nursing like a champ, said the doula, from her first moments in the world. When they turned out the lights in my room, I allowed a nurse to take her to the nursery. Baby kennel, Rob said. An hour later, the nurse came back and woke me up. Your baby's crying. Do you want to feed her? No, give her a bottle. The sun had been in my eyes all day, stinging them even behind sunglasses, along with the melting sunscreen. And by 8 o'clock, it was still aggressive as noon. I felt attacked, wanted to attack the nearest vulnerable thing. Guns, gold, and rock and roll. A Corvette convention in town, the downtown streets closed off and lined with Corvettes. The owners strolled past and sat at outdoor tables drinking beer, the guys, and wine, the wives. They're mostly in their 60s, prosperous looking in an unpleasant way. Prosperity that has abdicated responsibility. Smug was my interpretation. Their phallic substitutes looked cute and slightly threatening, as if they might spurt any minute. Still, I wouldn't mind a ride in a Corvette. Enjoyed the highest speed limit so far today, 80 miles per hour. I pushed to 90, the distances so distant and the road there so flat and foreshortened. We saw colts, but Muri called them ponies. Didn't I teach her the difference when she was 7? What else haven't I taught her? In Falls Park, we watched a mother duck and a duckling get what seemed to us too close to the edge of the falls. The water rushed furiously around them, and it seemed impossible that the duckling wouldn't be swept away. The mother was unconcerned, turning away from the duckling, often diving into the water for plants or fish. The baby was so tiny, but held its own and made its way into a little hollow in the rocks, and the mother followed. We moved to sit in the cool grass in the shade of an evergreen with long, lethal needles. Then a police car drove into the parking lot not far from where we were sitting. Murray clutched my hand. One of them's getting out his gun. I couldn't see, sun in eyes, and I couldn't honestly tell her the fear was irrational. Where are they going? They're talking to a man who's sitting on the path. He's naked. Let's go. So this next bit, skipping forward a bit, takes place in Branson, Missouri. And I didn't know before this about Branson, Missouri. And maybe some of you don't know Branson, Missouri, but it's kind of like a Midwest Las Vegas with country music. July 16th, Branson, Missouri. Oh, and I should say that there are like standalone titled poems mixed in with this diary narrative, and one of them is going to be in this section. I woke up to Rob's salty smell and the fucking sun. Replica of Empire State Building topped by King Kong. At first, I think it's the World Trade Center tower with its plume of smoke. Replica of Titanic. We're each given a passenger's name and have to wait until the end of the tour to find out whether we survive. I survive. Murray survives. Rob, as a male crew member, doesn't survive. Toy museum, quotes from Bible on walls, BB gun annex, segregated cabinets with Sambo and Aunt Jemima dolls, careless piles, dusty board games, unloved dolls. What I thought I had learned about towns, where there is money, towns are pleasant, and where there is no money, towns are unpleasant. But there has to be a quietness too. We play mini golf, our family sport, at Pirates Cove. And this is the poem called Mini Golf. The object of the game is to be a family sport. The object of a family is to self-destruct. Mini golf, like a family, creates its own artificial world. Mini golf, like a family, trades in myths and legends. In both, there are markers of individuality, club heights, ball colors, contradiction, rebellion, separation. Both are at their most intense in summer. Money troubles tend to disrupt each. The mini golf boom of the early 20th century came to an end during the economic depression in the late 1930s. Mini golf and families are for those who wish the past different. Mini golf was invented in the United States, as was my family. The object of the United States is to self-destruct. Can I prevent it with my pink putter and orange ball driving into the artificial sand trap or far into the myth of the unblemished, bloody summer? And I'm gonna skip ahead to our final destination, Key West, Florida, July 25th, Key West, Florida. Posh town with a mask of slackerdom. Someone made the money, who and how. Bernie addressing the DNC now. Murray says they all sound so fake. There's whiskey in the jar, Confederate flag on the car. Roosters strutting around Old Town remind me of Elizabeth Bishop's war poem. Walking to southernmost point, waves slapped the embankment and we slapped the concrete buoy monument, made it. We produced by far the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party, says Bernie. I am proud to stand with her. On gender. I said to Murray over key lime pie that we need more feminine energy in power to challenge the patriarchy. Feminine meant Bernie. She disagreed. She doesn't think anything is gendered. I modified. Nurturing energy instead of dominating energy. Then she could agree. Are mothers always a mystery to daughters? I don't want to be. Let's see. And this is the last section, or next to last section. July 27th, Key West to Miami to New York. ISIS knife attack in a church in France. Shooting at a teen club in Fort Myers. Shooting in Munich. Motherhood. A pineapple is grandma to a porcupine. A candle is grandma to a pair of wax lips. Each thing gives birth to something more vivid than itself, and so on. Stopped at a Starbucks on the way to the airport. Yes, corporate devil, but it's that or Waffle House. Had to make a U-turn. Gospel song on the radio. Jesus is with me when I need him most. You are leaving Key West, Paradise, USA. Nothing feels like what it's supposed to feel like. And this is the last of those standalone poems. It's called The Perfect Day. Every penetrating warm eye that is thrilled. Uproarious August other, uncommercial splashing, fizz water wet and spilled on me, the cloud heap, and we can like the swell. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, if we open it up for a brief Q&A.
Yes.
So we have some chairs over here. We can
Oh,
sit
okay.
over that everyone Zoom can see too. Thank you for the beautiful reading. That was really wonderful.
Thank you, James, for making it happen.
One simple question, and I apologize if I missed the detail if you revealed it at one point. But your daughter.
Oh, I should have said that. Yeah. Well, it was right before she went to college. So yeah, she was 17. Is that what you pictured?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did you, as you were taking that trip, were you sort of thinking about writing it, or like what, or were you taking notes, or did it just sort of suggest itself to you on the way?
I don't know if I must have had in mind that I wanted at least to document it in some way. I don't know if I envisioned a poem, because I do remember taking notes like at the end of every day in the hotel room, you know. Yeah, but it didn't take shape until I got here to Radcliffe in September, and I sort of took those notes and tried to give it some form. And I've always been interested in diary poems, so that was something I really wanted to do.
I guess this is kind of for either or both of you. I just know that you all have, both of you have like several collections out, and I mean, this is kind of apropos of nothing, but I'm just curious, like, how you feel that, like, has your style evolved like over your collections, or how do you feel different, or do you feel strange reading like your first collections, or?
Go ahead.
No, it is weird. I definitely feel things are so different from the first book. Probably the first book it's your whole life, or up to that point. And for me, with the first book, I think I was just I was so enamored of all different styles and, just poetry, that kind of everything went in there. So between the first and the second and third are somewhat closer, I feel like, but between the first and the second book, there is a great divide, I feel. So, yeah.
I mean, I guess so, but I don't know how exactly, because I can see, like, if I look back at my first book, it is very different than this book, but It was a different time. It was, my first book was published in 2002, but like you said, Sandra, it was everything I had written up to that time. So and I feel like it's very 90s in a way, that first book, in that, or at least in the poetic circles I was traveling in, there was a lot of interest in ornament. And I feel like there are a lot of pretty things in that first book, and I'm less interested in that, or that nowadays. But I remember when I finished my first book, I said, well, I think I've exhausted myself as a subject, but it turns out no. So that has remained the same. I have a question for Sandra, if that's okay. I really do love the A Shaggy Dog Story.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't know if you're willing to do this, but could you talk a little about what you wanted it to be and how it became what it was?
I think I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but I did have a desire to write something longer, because I write such short, compressed lyrics. And I mean, which is why, again, whenever I read like a book like July, I'm just like, how do you do this? So for that, though, I think the subject matter, I wanted to keep revolving it in from a lot of different perspectives. So it kind of lent itself to that kind of immediately. But I was also aware, I mean, I think, sort of to your question about, books, how they change. I think the through line for me is that sort of self-consciousness. I've sort of figured out a different way to wield it in this book versus, say, my first book. And in something like A Shaggy Dog Story, I felt I could do something with that without kind of painting myself into a corner, if that makes sense. And so with each section, I mean, it was fun, but then there's also knowing, like, do you do more? Do you do, like, what? How do you know exactly when to stop? What's quite enough? So it was super interesting. I would like to practice also doing more long works. I have a question for you, actually. if I'm allowed. So when I was reading July, there's July, which is the long section, but also the Goddess. When you conceived of the book, because I'm curious about, like, organizational strategies, like, were those two things already in mind when you were writing this, or?
So I usually do, I don't know about you, but I usually do have the sense of a shape of a book while I'm working. Like, at some point I start seeing the shape of the book. And I did have in mind that I wanted the first section to be just individual poems, because I miss those old-fashioned, unruly collections of poems. So I wanted that to be the first section. And then I knew I wanted to do the diary poem. And then I knew there would be another section, but I didn't know what it was. And in fact, I didn't start that. So that poem, The Goddess, which makes up the third section of my book, starts November 7th, 2016. That's so it sort of takes up from the road trip chronologically. And I didn't start writing it until that happened. And so, so I didn't know from the beginning, but I knew like it would have these three movements, I guess. Yes,
Another question. That's all I'm thinking. one thing I loved about this reading and also about both your books in general is how you're using humor. And I'm just curious if you can talk about how that comes into your poems, because it's a way of, to my ear anyway, it's a way of using humor, but not necessarily writing a funny poem, just sort of letting the like wry, sort of surreal, strange moments come in and be there. And I don't know if it's something that I'm curious about as I'm trying to write, and I'm wondering how you all think of it in your work.
Do you have an answer? I'm not sure what to say about that, except I'm a big fan of books that do put everything in, like you said you did in your first book. I'm a huge fan of books or poems that are sort of radically inclusive and put it all in. So, you know, that's one of the tonalities or approaches or, you know, colors on the palette, I guess, would be humor. And I like to let it all in.
I mean, just adding on to that, I really appreciated it. It reminded me so much, like it really like put you in the like setting of the poem, right? So it wasn't just like one emotion or feeling that was evoking, was every specific line, which so reminded me of like being on a road trip, right? Going through and seeing like laughing at billboards and stuff like that. Like that's what the humorous bits reminded me of, is little things like that, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Your humor?
I mean, I appreciate, I did hear sometimes, Anna, you chuckling, which I was like, thank you, because sometimes I feel like so solemn, but I'm like, no, it's sort of a black humor or wry humor, and I hope that comes through. I mean, because some of these situations, they can be so dark or so terrifying or so difficult, but they're also very funny, you know, looked at a certain light. I'm happy if it comes up. I don't know if I necessarily say, oh, I want to try to be funny in this poem, but usually it'll come about, hopefully in the best way, if you're figuring something out in the poem and somehow that is part of it, you're like the side effect of it. In the discovery, like, oh, that's sad, but kind of funny, or that's difficult, but a little bit haha, you know, as well. So yeah, but I love it as a tone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that note, let's give the poets another round of applause. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yes,
if you
thank
please move your chairs up against the wall. We have some books for sale. The poets will sign books. Thanks for
Should we
coming.
just stay here?
Next
I guess so,
event is,
yeah.
next Thursday, Forrest Gander is reading here.
I really do. Oh,
I didn't
Forrest
realize
Gander.
that.
Oh, there was another one happening. I
There's a
saw.
lot of good readings happening.
Yeah, here in
Yeah.
particular,
Yeah.
I was looking at the list.
Yeah.